Good morning and welcome to Algebra 1 for Wednesday, May 27th. All right, let's remember the quadratic formula and what we're going to do with it. Also understand that the answers to a quadratic equation could be whole numbers, or they could be fractions or decimals. They could be positive or negative. They could be the number 0. And what they show you are the x-intercepts of the parabola itself. Okay, there could be 1 or 2 or no answers, depending upon the equation, if the parabola goes through the x-axis once or twice or never. That's what it's showing us. Okay, here's examples again. So let's take this one. Here we go. Y equals 3x squared plus 2x minus 8. And I'm going to identify A, that's 3, B is 2, C is negative 8. And here we go with the equation. Remember the equation. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, let it get stuck in your head because it'll help you remember what the actual equation is. So x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 8 all over 2 times 3. All I did was I substituted in the appropriate values where they go in the equation, and now we're going to solve them nice and carefully. Here we go. So we have negative 2 plus or minus square root of 4. Negative times negative is positive, so it's going to be plus. 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 times 8 is 96. All over 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay, so that's negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 over 6. Now, once again, I gave you a problem that is a perfect square, so the answers are going to result in this case, an integer. So we have negative 2 plus or minus 10 over 6. When you take the square root of the number, you're no longer writing the square root symbol because, of course, it doesn't belong there anymore. You've done what it asked you to do. Now, there will be two solutions, plus or minus. So I'm going to put them over here this time. X is negative 2 plus 10 divided by 6. I'll do that one first. Negative 2 plus 10 is 8 divided by 6. That means that x is 6 goes into 8 one time with 2 over 6 left over, which is 1/3. So one of my answers now is x equals 1 and 1/3. Again, if you were to graph that, there's no chance you're going to correctly identify that the place where the curve goes through the x-axis is exactly 1 and 1/3. That's going to be impossible. So let's move on to the other side of the coin, the minus part. Negative 2 minus 10 divided by 6. Negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12, and negative 12 divided by 6 is negative 2. So we have our solutions. And again, even though it's using a formula that might be a little complicated for you right now, it's so much easier than graphing to solve and then being stuck with what that is, because again, it's hard to tell exactly that it's 1 and 1/3 from a graph. Move on to the next problem. This one had two solutions. We found them without too much stress, and the answer was an integer for the square root, which made life easier. It will not always happen that way. Okay, let's try another example. Y equals x squared minus 16. Now, this is an example in which one of the terms is missing. We already talked a while ago about what that means. It means one of the terms is the number 0. Which term is it? Well, my A term is the coefficient of the x squared, always is, and that's the number 1. My B term is the coefficient of the x term, which is missing. All right, well, the x term is missing, so that B has to be the number 0. And our C term is negative 16. Okay, now we just do the same thing we were doing before. X equals negative 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 16, negative 16, all over 2 times 1 this time. Okay, negative 0 is still 0. There's no negative 0. 0 squared is 0. Negative times negative is positive, so I'm going to add to it. 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 times 16, anyone? 64, all over 2. Now that's going to be 0 plus or minus square root 64 over 2. Again, square root 64 is 8. So it's 0 plus or minus 8 over 2. I still have two solutions. I'm still going to go up here and solve them carefully. So I have 0 plus 8 over 2, and that's 8 over 2, and that's 4. And I have 0 minus 8 over 2, and that's negative 8 over 2, and that's negative 4. So my solutions are 4 and negative 4. All right? Nice and easy. Two solutions. Now this time it was 4 and negative 4. Whenever the b term is missing, the solutions, when you find them, will be plus and minus the same value, 4 and negative 4, 3 and negative 3, whatever it is. That's what happens when you've got the b term missing. Okay, next example. A lot of examples today. Good idea to write them down in your notes. Good idea to take notes, in case you're not. Let's try this one. We have y equals x squared minus 4x plus 4. Same story. So we're going to do a, b, and c. This time a is 1, b is negative 4, c is positive 4. When b is negative, you got to be very careful, like super careful how you plug it in. X equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of parentheses this time, negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. Not sure if you could hear it, but my daughter is having a very good time in the other room and laughing a lot. A little distracting, but that's okay. All over 2 times 1. Okay, now, negative 4 is 4. Plus or minus the square root of. Be very careful here. You got to be so careful. Negative 4 squared. If you're just using a calculator and you type in negative 4 squared, it says negative 16 and it's wrong. Negative 4 is the quantity. When you square a negative number, it becomes positive. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. So be very careful over here. Minus 4 times 1 times 4 is negative, and 4 times 1 is 4 times 4 is 16. All over 2. So this becomes 4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. Now, 0 does have a square root. It's 0, because 0 times 0 is 0. So this is 4 plus or minus nothing over 2. Adding 0, subtracting 0, that's not going to change the fact that my numerator is going to be 4 no matter what. So you could write it out if you want to. X equals 4 plus 0 over 2, and x equals 4 minus 0 over 2. But no matter what you do, there's only one solution this time. So you'd write x equals 2. There's only one solution. I want you to understand that there's only one solution whenever the value under the square root turns out to be the number 0. The value under the square root has a special name, and we're going to get into that shortly. But when that number is 0, there will only be one solution to the parabola. It touches the x-axis and then bounces right off. One solution. And it's at x equals 2. And we continue with what I think is our last example of the day. Happy day. It's only 9 minutes and 4 seconds in. Okay, last example of the day. Y equals x squared plus 5x plus 10. All right, cool. So, ABC, not a hard thing to do. A is 1 again. B is positive 5. C is 10. Plug it in. X equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 10 all over 2 times 1. So x equals negative 5 plus or minus 25, that's 5 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 10 is 40, all over 2. x equals -5 plus or minus the square root of -15 all over 2. Now, 15, or -15, are not perfect squares. So the answer would be a decimal if you could find one, but there's a problem here, and here's the problem. If you ask your calculator to find the square root of -15, it's going to do something. It's going to say error, non-real answer. There is no square root of a negative number in the real number system. We make a distinction here because you'll find out in Algebra 2, there are what we call complex or imaginary numbers. We're not doing that yet. That's coming next year. But there's no real square root to a negative number. So what do? Do you just erase the negative sign and say, it didn't matter? No. This is the way you find out that there's no solution to this parabola. It does not cross the x-axis. If you wanted to verify, you could graph it on your graphing calculator or Desmos. It's a simple one, x squared plus 5x plus 10. All right, so let me just hit graph and see what happens. And the parabola comes down and, it never touches the x-axis. Well, this is the way the math tells you that. Because the value under the square root is negative. You could stop right there because you can't move forward anyway, and you can say that there is no solution. Be careful when you decide there's no solution, though. If you have Desmos available to you or you have a graphing calculator, you can still graph it just to double check you didn't make any mistakes along the way. Because maybe that was supposed to be a plus sign, and you just made a mistake up here, or when you labeled ABC, and there is a solution, and you should find it. In this case, there isn't. We didn't make any mistakes. There's no solution to this parabola because it does not cross the x-axis. So these are basically all the kinds of problems you could see when solving with the quadratic formula. And here is your assignment. You got off with no homework last night, so last 2 nights. So here we go. Here's the problem. Y equals -2x squared minus 4x plus 6. I want you to solve with the quadratic formula. Don't graph it to solve it. Obviously, we're working on the quadratic formula right now to solve problems. So there's your one equation. Solve it with the quadratic formula. Please have it to me no later than tomorrow morning before the lesson and the review is delivered to you. Okay? Have a great day.